Very good afternoon, dear students. In the last class, we had talked about the Routh-Hurwitz array for checking the stability of network functions. We had also known a few things related to network functions. So after we have taken an overview of network functions and how to uh, determine the stability of any given network with the help of network function, now we move forward, and in the topic that we are starting, we will learn about network synthesis. Like if we are being given some network function, we will try to realize the network in the form of resistance, capacitance, and inductance by using certain mathematical tools. That is known as network synthesis. But before we move to network synthesis, we must determine whether the network that we are going to synthesize, that will be stable or not, and that is realizable or not. That checking is very, very important. So we will try to build the concept related to those stability and realizability first, and then we will move to the techniques with the help of which we can synthesize the network. Okay, so let us move forward. In fact, in today's class, the concepts that we are going to discuss, some of those things we have already studied uh, indirectly in the previous class, and we will continue with that in today's class also. So as I told you that in the previous class, I talked about the stability of network function. So I move one step forward. I want to basically clarify the concept of stability in your mind so that you are able to appreciate what is the meaning of stability and how to correlate stability with the network function, or the pole zero plot that we had seen in the last few classes. So students, first let me ask you a question that uh, which of the following functions which I have shown in this slide, they are considered stable, or what is the meaning of stability if I talk in terms of input to any system or output or the response of any system. So we call a system stable means which give stable output corresponding to a stable input, or in other words I should say that if my bound input is bounded, then my output should also be bounded. So in short, we call such systems as BIBO. That means bounded input and bounded output. So obviously all of you can appreciate this fact that the stable systems, they have bounded output or they have controlled output. That is called stable system. Unstable system may go out of our hands or out of our control, and we do not have any control over unstable system after a certain amount of time. So that's why we never talk about unstable system, because we cannot control that system. So for that we need stable system, and stability can be easily judged by looking at the kind of output that system provides, which should be bounded or which should converge. Okay, so I have shown you few functions here. First, let us see. The first function is a sinusoidal function, and if we carefully observe this function, it is an oscillatory function, okay, which is oscillating. Fine. So it is continuously oscillating. Its amplitude is also constant, means it's not decaying at all. Okay, so though it is not going out of bound, it is not unbounded, still it is continuing in a continuous fashion, or it is continuously oscillatory. Okay, we cannot say for this function that this will become zero at infinity or at infinite time. Okay, so we can say that this sinusoidal function lies at the boundary of stable system and unstable system. We cannot call it bounded one, we cannot call it unbounded one, so it lies on the borderline. This is one thing that you should appreciate. Okay, so your sinusoidal or cosinusoidal function gives us continuous oscillation. But if we want that the output of or the response, sinusoidal response or cosinusoidal response decays with time. Okay, so you look at this figure here, though the inherent response is the sinusoidal only or cosinusoidal only, but its amplitude is decreasing with time. It's decreasing, and we are hopeful that at t equal to infinity, the value of this function will become 0. So obviously it will converge. It will give us a bounded output. So it will definitely give us stable output. Okay, so we call this first one as sinusoidal response, and we call it as damped sinusoid. You must have heard the term damp. Okay, and the damping function here is matching with that of the exponent one. So it is damping in exponential manner. So you must have also studied exponential function in your mathematics. So there are two kind of exponential functions. One is exponentially decaying, means as time increases the value decreases, value of exponential function decreases. And another is exponentially growing function, where as the time increases the output increases exponentially. So we can very easily see that in case our exponential function is decaying with time, okay, it will give us bounded output because it will converge at t equal to infinity. And you already know that your exponential function which is decaying with time can be represented as e raised to power minus at, or in general e raised to power minus t, which is this one. Whereas if exponential growth is there, here instead of minus t we will have e raised to power t plus t. So this function will grow out of bound as t increases. Okay, so we can say that this exponentially decaying function will give us stable output, and this will give us unstable output. Fine. Similarly, your sinusoidal response, if it is not decaying exponentially, rather it is increasing in an exponential manner, then that will also give us unstable output. As I have shown in this figure, that the amplitude of your sinusoidal function is increasing exponentially. So obviously at t equal to infinity, it will grow out of bound. We will not have any control, and it will give us infinite output. So it will become unbounded. And if we have such response for any system, we will call that system as unstable system. So students, I hope you understand the objective of presenting these functions in front of you. These are commonly occurring functions. I want you to clarify in your mind the concept of stability. Now what I'll do, in the previous classes, we have learnt about Laplace transform. We have learnt about poles and zeros and the pole zero plot. So I want to correlate these functions which are present in this slide with the Laplace transform and the pole zero plot. So I have told you which functions are stable, which functions are unstable. So now we will correlate the stability and instability with the location of the poles and zeros in pole zero plot. If you remember, I told you in the previous class that your poles and zeros must be located at certain point, or at certain, you can say, area for a system to be stable. So I'm trying to prove that point by considering these functions, that if we have unstable or unbounded output function, then what will be its pole zero plot? And if we have a stable output function, then what will be the pole zero plot for that function? I hope all of you have understood the concept here. So let us move forward. So we saw exponential function, and we now need to see the Laplace transform of these functions. This we have already discussed in detail. Just for your review purpose and to maintain the continuity with the concept of stability, I have included this slide. So here I have put both the function. Your minus indicates the exponentially decaying function and plus indicates the exponentially rising function. So the Laplace transform of this will be 1 by s plus alpha for the first case and s minus alpha for the second case. So this is the Laplace transform of these exponential function. I'll talk about this thing related to pole zero plot in the next slide. Now let us see the Laplace transforms of a sinusoidal function. So we have already derived this thing in the chapter of Laplace transform, that if we have sine omega to omega t ut, then its Laplace transform will be omega by s square plus omega square. Okay. Then what will be the Laplace transform of this? As I told you that this sinusoidal function is decaying exponentially. It means your sinusoidal function sine omega t is multiplied with e raised to power minus alpha t. So this is the graphical representation of this function e raised by minus alpha t sine omega t. Ut indicates that this is in existence for t greater than 0. And we have also seen the Laplace transform of this, which comes out to be omega by s plus alpha square plus omega square. So we by using the property, we have already seen that this s square will become s plus alpha square. So one thing you notice here, that in case of exponentially decaying one, that is in case of stable output response, we will have plus here. And had this been the case, this will come when we have e raised to power plus alpha t. So in case of s raised to power e raised to power plus alpha t, we will have s minus alpha here. Notice this thing. Okay. So for bounded output, we will have s plus alpha square plus omega square, whereas for unbounded exponential output for your sinusoidal function, it will give s minus alpha square plus omega square. I hope you are able to correlate these functions and their Laplace transforms. Next. So now, as I was talking to you, that first we saw which system functions are stable or unstable. Then we obtained their Laplace transforms. And from those Laplace transforms, now we will plot pole zero plots. Okay. And I have already talked about pole zero plot in the last class. And in fact, we did some numericals also related to pole zero plots. And we also derived time domain behavior of a given network function using pole zero plots also. So today we will try to look into its stability. So students, this is the expression that we have just seen, that the Laplace transform of these functions will be 1 by s plus alpha naught in case of decaying one and s minus alpha naught in case of the exponential growth. So here, if you see, the denominator part gives us the pole and the numerator part gives us 0. Okay, so there is no 0 here and we have pole. So in case of exponentially decaying function, your pole is s is equal to minus sigma naught. Whereas in case of exponentially increasing function, your pole is s is equal to plus sigma naught. So, and if we want to represent this on your pole zero plot, we know that your x-axis is sigma axis and y-axis is j omega axis, because s is nothing but sigma plus j omega. So minus sigma naught is nothing but a real value and minus 1. So this is our minus sigma naught. So you see here that exponentially decaying function was a stable function giving us bounded output. In that case, our pole is located in the left hand side of the S plane. So this is your left hand side of, you can say, negative half plane. So this is your negative half plane, negative half S plane, and on the right hand side of j omega, it is your positive half S plane. So for this stable function, exponentially decaying function, your pole is located in the negative half S plane. Whereas for the unstable system, your pole is located in the positive half of the S plane. We will further reinforce this concept by taking a few more functions. I hope everything is clear up to this point. So now let us move to some more functions. Now we have cosinusoidal function instead of sine. Its Laplace transform is given as fs is equal to s by s square plus omega square. Fine. And you can see here that there is 1 0 in the numerator and there are two poles in the denominator. So if you obtain the roots of the denominator, you will get it to be s is equal to plus minus j omega. So you'll have a pair of complex roots. Okay, so we can represent these roots on pole 0 plot. So we have 0 at 0 and we have two poles, one is plus j omega and another is minus j omega. So what we have, our poles are located on the j omega axis. See, in the previous slide I told you that we have negative half of S plane, okay, and we have positive half of S plane. And where is the boundary line? Boundary line is the j omega axis. That is, on the left hand side of j omega axis or y axis, we have negative half S plane, and on the right hand side of j omega axis, we have positive half S plane. So if we talk about j omega axis, and if we say that our system is stable when poles are located in negative half S plane, our system is unstable if our poles are located in positive half S plane. What will happen if poles are located on j omega axis? So since this is boundary line, we can call that system as marginally stable. I told you this thing in the previous class also. So we can say that the stability when the poles are located on j omega axis, it is your marginal stability. And I told you while discussing sine function and cosine function that they are neither decaying nor increasing out of bound. So your continuous oscillations are there. They can be called as marginally stable system. And we have seen that in case of these continuous oscillations, our poles are located on j omega axis, which justifies our assumption earlier. Okay, now what we are doing, we are imposing an exponentially decaying function on this cosinusoidal function. So if we do that, this cosinusoidal function will become completely stable function, and we get the Laplace transform as this one. So if you multiply the above one with e raised power minus alpha t, your s will become s plus sigma naught. Okay, and if you plot this thing on your S plane, what do you get? You have 0 as s equal to minus sigma naught, this one. Okay, and you have now two complex roots. One is minus sigma plus j omega naught and another is minus sigma minus j omega naught. See, if you carefully observe this pole 0 plot and the above one, what has happened, that the above pole 0 plot is shifted from j omega axis to the negative half of the S plane. And as soon as our poles are located in the negative half of S plane, our system becomes stable. This is what I wanted to prove to you, dear students, that we first took certain stable and unstable commonly occurring functions, and then we plotted their pole 0 plot, and from there we try to understand this thing, that what should be the ideal location of these poles and zeros in case of stability. I hope this thing is clear to each and every student. So I have jotted down the observations from the pole zero plot, though I have explained them earlier also. So first is that when we have undamped oscillatory function, like we have sine and cosine, there we did not have any real part, means our sigma was 0, and your poles and zeros, they were present on the j omega axis. Okay. And in case of damped sinusoid means you imposed exponentially decreasing function on your sinusoidal function. In that case, we had both real part and your imaginary part. Your S became your minus sigma plus minus j omega. So this is we observed in case of damped sinusoid. Okay. And where for the case of decaying exponential signals, what we had got a pole only at the negative sigma axis. Fine. Next. So here we have talked about the necessary conditions which must be you can say fulfilled for the stability of a network function. Obviously our network function is given in the form of, you can say, Laplace transform. We have already talked about this network function. So for its stability there are certain conditions which must be met. Okay. So now though I have already told you, but here these are presented in some different flavor. So first condition is your Fs cannot have poles in the right half of S plane. This I already explained. Second thing is that your Fs should not have any multiple poles in the j omega axis. This is one point that we have not discussed so far. The example of sine and cosine that we saw, in that case we had uh, a pair of, you can say, complex roots, that is your plus minus j omega. Fine. So here we had only one pair. Okay. Multiple pole means, like if we have one more pole here at the same location, here also at the same location, in that case, like your system may not remain stable. So that is the meaning of multiple pole. And how will that come? Like if we have say for example S square, it means we have two roots at S equal to 0 only. If we have say S plus 2 whole square, what does it mean? We have two roots, two poles at S is equal to minus 2. So we have multiple roots. This is the meaning of multiple roots. If you have square, cube, fourth power, so that multiple pole thing should not be there. These poles should be simple. Okay. Another thing, we had also talked about this thing in the previous class also, that the degree of the numerator cannot exceed the degree of denominator by more than unity. This we had already talked about. Fine. So we had seen the network function as the ratio of your AS and BS, and we had expressed those polynomials, and then we discussed this degree part. So there should not be a difference of more than one in the degree of your numerator and denominator. So students, in the previous class also we had talked about such conditions related to your driving point functions, related to your transfer functions. Now we are talking about your network function. Similarly, we'll talk about certain condition related to Hurwitz polynomial. So this may be confusing for you people in the initial instance, but if you regularly read the things, you will be able to accustom yourself regarding these conditions, and you will be able to understand clearly. So right now, don't worry, you may get confused for the time being, but with repeated reading, you will be able to clarify all the things in your mind. So these are the necessary condition for stability of a network function. So now I introduce one more thing in front of you, and that is Hurwitz polynomial. The word Hurwitz you have studied in the previous class also. There I talked about Routh-Hurwitz array. So it is that same Hurwitz, but we didn't talk about Hurwitz polynomial. Okay, so here we will learn about a topic that is known as positive real function. If you go through the syllabus of unit number 3 of this subject, you will come across a term positive real function. For that positive real function, one condition is that your polynomial should be Hurwitz. So that's why first you must understand what is a Hurwitz polynomial and how to determine whether a given polynomial in Laplace is a type Hurwitz or not. So now we will study about these Hurwitz polynomial and how to determine the existence of Hurwitz polynomial. So the condition is a polynomial is said to be Hurwitz if and only if these two conditions are met. First thing is PS is real when S is real. So what is PS? PS is a polynomial in S, as I showed you in the previous slide. Also, it can be any polynomial starting from s raised power n going up to, you can say, s raised power 0. If you substitute s as real, then your PS must be real. Okay, this is one condition. Second is the roots of PS, means if you obtain the roots of that Hurwitz polynomial, those roots have the real parts. Okay, and those real parts are to be 0 or negative. What does it mean? Say S is the root of that polynomial, and we define those roots in the form of, say, sigma plus minus j omega. Now what is sigma? Sigma is the real part of that root. So what does it say here? That this sigma will either be less than 0, means negative, or it will be equal to 0. What does it want to say? That by enforcing this thing, we are trying to ensure that the roots will be present in the negative half of S plane when sigma less than 0, or at the maximum on imaginary axis or on j omega axis. But in no case our root of Hurwitz polynomial will be located in the positive half of S plane. That we want to ensure by enforcing this condition. I hope this thing is clear to all of you. So the same thing is again described below. So Hurwitz polynomial can have these three types of roots. We can have roots as real and positive. Okay, then we can have roots as, you can say, imaginary roots, that is plus minus j omega, which will lie on your j omega axis. We can have roots as your minus of sigma, means your roots on in the negative half of S plane. Okay, so in point number C, your roots in the negative half of S plane. In point number B, your roots will be on the imaginary axis. In case of point number A, your roots will be on sigma axis. So only these three types of roots are possible if you consider a polynomial as Hurwitz polynomial. I hope this concept is clear. So again, the same thing in a different flavor. See, by looking at the polynomial, we cannot guarantee just by looking at that polynomial whether that polynomial follows the Hurwitz polynomial conditions or not. So what has been done? Uh, Two types of conditions have been defined for Hurwitz polynomial. One is necessary conditions. Okay, so if we confirm that your necessary conditions are fulfilled, then we can be hopeful that our polynomial will be a Hurwitz polynomial. See, mind these words, hopeful. I'm not saying that with guarantee necessary conditions will tell you polynomial is Hurwitz, but if necessary conditions are not fulfilled, then we can directly say polynomial is not Hurwitz. But if necessary conditions are fulfilled, then we can say that there is a possibility of our polynomial being Hurwitz polynomial. So firstly, necessary but not sufficient conditions for Hurwitz polynomial. These are the same thing that we talked about in the previous slide. These are your necessary but not sufficient. So if these conditions are not fulfilled, we can directly say that polynomial is non-Hurwitz. If these are fulfilled, we'll have to move one step further to confirm whether polynomial is Hurwitz or not. Okay. So let us see these again. All the coefficients of polynomial must be positive and real. Okay, if your polynomial is in the form of S, then its coefficients must be positive and real. This is indirectly ensuring that your roots are lying in the negative half of S plane. Then another necessary condition is, we have talked about this condition earlier also, that is if your polynomial is like this, S raised to power 3 plus S raised to power 2 plus say S plus say 5. If this is a polynomial in S, so we can see here that all the powers of S are present: 3, 2, 1 and S raised to power 0. So there must not be any power of S missing. Like assume that this term is not there, S square. Okay. And in that case, we say that one of the powers is missing, and say S is also not present. We have only S cube plus 5. So then your polynomial is non-Hurwitz. However, uh, though we are saying that no power should be missing, but one thing is allowed, that either all odd terms are missing or all even terms are missing. Okay, means this thing is allowed. S raised to power 4 plus S raised to power 2 plus say 6. So here what is happening, all the odd terms are missing, we have all the even terms present, and similarly your all odd terms can be present. Fine. So these are the necessary condition. Now necessary and sufficient condition. So if you fulfill necessary and sufficient condition for Hurwitz polynomial, then guaranteed way you can claim that your polynomial, given polynomial, is Hurwitz polynomial. For that you will have to carry out a mathematical fraction expansion to declare a polynomial as Hurwitz polynomial. So let us see that, though you may not be able to understand this thing clearly from this slide, but I have deliberately included few examples in the coming slides so that you will be able to understand this necessary and sufficient condition. So you just go through the text which is written on the this slide, and then we will be able to understand it completely from the examples. So let me tell you what is happening here. Uh, See, we have ZS as our you can say Hurwitz polynomial. What we will do, we will express ZS equal to MS by NS. And what is MS and what is NS? MS represents the even part of PS. Okay, say our polynomial is PS. Okay, and our PS is say S raised to power 4 plus S raised to power 3, then plus S square plus S and plus 9 say. Now your MS represent even part of PS. Even part of PS means S4 plus S square plus 9. So these terms are taken together and written as MS. And what is ns? Ns is the odd part. Okay, that is the remaining terms. So these terms will go as your ns. Okay, so after segregating our given polynomial as odd and even, and then we have to express that as ms by ns, that is even part in the numerator and odd part in the denominator. Okay, so now what we have to do, we have to divide these two through continued fraction expansion. I'll just tell you how to do that. And then we have to observe the quotients. So all these quotients which we get by continued fraction expansion, they must be positive, real and positive. So if we ensure that, then we can say for sure in guaranteed way that our polynomial, given polynomial is Hurwitz polynomial, and it becomes the sufficient condition for that. Okay, so in case there is one special case also, if your continued fraction is prematurely terminated somewhere in between, then we can proceed further by taking derivative of the given polynomial, that is p dash s. This thing also will be clear through example. So I hope this thing is clear to each and everyone. So here in this slide, I'm taking few examples where we will determine whether our polynomial is Hurwitz or not. So we will take each of these examples and try to reinforce our concepts related to Hurwitz polynomial. So let us take first example, that is s square plus 4s plus 10. So first, obviously, we have to check for necessary conditions. So we can see here that all the coefficients, they are positive. Okay, and second is there is no missing term, all the terms are present. S2 is there, S1 is there, S0 is there. So we have all the coefficients as positive sign, there is no missing term, and it is a quadratic equation. So we can directly say that your polynomial is Hurwitz. We need not go further. Okay, now then for the remaining two polynomials, let us check the necessary conditions first. Necessary condition is all the coefficients are positive, that is fulfilled. Here also all the coefficients are positive, that is also fulfilled. In both the polynomials, there is no missing term. We have s raised power 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Similarly, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. So means the polynomials in B and C, they both fulfill necessary conditions. But by looking at these polynomials, we cannot declare that these polynomials are Hurwitz polynomial. For that, we will have to get the sufficient condition fulfilled. Only then we'll be able to say whether your given polynomial is Hurwitz or not. So in the next slide, we will just look at that example, and that will also help you in clarifying this sufficient condition, as I discussed, that we will obtain ms by ns through continued fraction expansion. So this is the example. So we have ps equal to this. We have split our ps into even part. So see, these are the even terms, that is s raised power 4, 2s square, and 2, which is nothing but s raised power 0, and 0 is also even here. Okay, and then ns is your odd term, which is nothing but s cube plus, you can say, 3s. So what we have to do, we have to divide ms by ns. We have written it like this. Now what is the meaning of continuous fraction? So we will put the numerator as your dividend, okay, in the normal division method. This is our divisor, s cube plus 3s. Okay, and we will divide. So if we divide, what will happen? Our quotient is s. So s raised power 4 plus 3s square, and then if we subtract, what do we get? We get minus s square plus 2. Okay, so once we have done in continued fraction, what will happen? This divisor, it becomes now the dividend. Okay, so and this remainder of the previous one, it becomes the divisor part. So we now divide, we'll have to use minus s. Okay, so what do we get? S of s cube, then minus 2s. So if we subtract, these will be cancelled. So this 3s minus, we subtract, so minus minus becomes plus, so it becomes 5s. We don't have any other term, so this remainder becomes your divisor for the next division, and this term becomes the dividend for the next term. So we have minus s square plus 2. So we again divide, we will have to multiply with minus s by 5, so that we get minus s square here. So if we subtract, these terms are cancelled. So we don't have anything, means 0. So this 2 as remainder comes here. This 5 comes here. So we now take a uh, quotient as 5s by 2, and we get 5s, and your remainder is what? 0. So once we get 0 like this, then our continued fraction method is stopped. So now what we have to do, we have to observe all the quotients. Quotient means this one. These are the quotients. Okay, and these quotients must be positive. Must be positive. Let me bring that slide to you so that you are able to again see the quotients alpha 1, alpha 2 in the continued fraction. Okay, must be real and positive. Not only positive, they must be real also. Okay, so you can see here that this is a negative, this is negative, so it means our all the quotients, they are not positive. So that means the given polynomial is not Hurwitz polynomial. Okay, so this is how we apply continued fraction method. Fine, let us move to one more example. This is your part number C. So necessary condition is fulfilled. We have to check the sufficient condition. This is your even part plus odd part. This is even, this is odd. We will divide even part by odd part. So this is even part, s raised power 4 plus 39 s square plus 20. This is your odd part, 11 s cube plus 51s. So we divide. So first here, we will take the quotient in such a way that our highest power term is cancelled. Okay, so if we multiply 11 s cube by s by 11, we get s4 plus 51 s square by, and we subtract. So if we subtract, this term will be cancelled. Okay, we are left with 39 s square minus 51 by 11 s square, and we get this one, 378 s square by plus 11, and this 20 as it is. This becomes the divisor, and this becomes the dividend. Now we again try to match this and this. Okay, so for this we'll have to take quotient as 121 by 378s. This thing is cancelled. We have minus sign here. If you subtract, you get this. Okay, now this divisor becomes quotient here, sorry, dividend here, and then we divide. This is our quotient. Earlier this was the quotient, earlier this was the quotient. So we match them, and we divide, we get the same term. This will be cancelled, and we are left with 20. So this 20 comes here, and this becomes our divisor. So again we divide, and finally we get 0. So now you see all the 4 coefficients, they are positive and real. Okay, and it means this polynomial is following the sufficient conditions for your Hurwitz polynomial, and we can declare it to be Hurwitz polynomial. So this is how we have to apply sufficient condition and declare whether a given polynomial is Hurwitz or not. Okay. Uh, I have included in this slides 3 more polynomial for your reference. This is your homework, students. You can note down these polynomials, and in the next class, if there is any difficulty in the determination of these polynomials as Hurwitz polynomial, you can discuss with me. So students, I stop here, and we will continue in the next class.